Hey guys, Brent Hull here for the book, right? I want to talk to you today about the challenge of organizing all this information and the challenge of putting it together because of where things land and when things were built, transitional things that cause cloudiness about what it really is original, what period it came from, and how that happens across many different spectrums. Because we've got to put all this information together, yet everything's not going to fall into this perfect box. I'm going to share that all with you. Come join me today. I talked to you last time about how I offered the book in two different ways, right? I said we could do it by topic, moldings, stairs, doors, windows, or by period, Georgian, Federal, Greek Revival. My mind, okay, and the way I have categorized and put together millwork and moldings and interiors in my mind is by period. And so you see me up here kind of thinking that way. What the editors want, what the book company want, is they want me to do it by topic. So I'm going to try to do both in the book. I'm going to try with appendixes. I want to show people how things are working as far as architectural styles, but then also, by type, talk about moldings and how moldings change over that period. So it's going to be both, okay? But for my frame of reference, the way I need to put it together, this is how it's going to work. Now, realize that when we talk about colonial revival today, right, it really encompasses this era even into the Greek revival. So maybe pre-classical or pre-industrial era. So from even into the 1860s all the way back to 1640. If you have a colonial revival house, you might have Greek revival elements, you might have federal elements, you might have Georgian elements, you might have pre-Georgian elements, okay? And so it gets a little bit confusing, and so it's going to help to, put this together. Really, the colonial period is us, the United States, the 13 colonies, right? That's why it's called the colonial period. The colonies are a collection of, colonies. And so it was called the colonial period, right? Fast forward 200 years, 250 years, we just call it all colonial revival. When I talk about colonial, okay, I'm pretty much talking Federal Georgian, and pre-Georgian, but I'm also going to talk about the Georgian period, which is 1740 to 1780, essentially the end of the American Revolution, and then the Federal period, 1780 to 1820. But there are also elements that are going to be from that pre-Georgian era that we're going to see as well. Now, the other piece of the thing that makes it complicated is that there are high-style Georgians and low-style Georgians. And so a Georgian house built in Philadelphia in 1760, say like the Blackwell Parlor at Winter Tour or Port Royal at Winter Tour, both 1760s type houses, those are very high-style Georgian things. And yet if you go to New Hampshire in 1760, right, you'll see things like Hardenberg, right, which is a very early rustic timbered thing with very little millwork, very, very rustic, okay? Still in the Georgian period, but stylistically really looking more pre-Georgian in the colonial period. So how to put all this together and help us think about and design and organize these things is part of what I'm trying to explain. That I'm going to have a timeline, right, with houses, okay? And I'm going to list off houses from different periods, and they're going to run along here and be built here. But what happened if they had a remodel here, right? There's a famous house in Charleston when I did the Windsor line that we used, and it was a Georgian house with federal moldings. I'm trying to explain that this is going to be a hard thing to kind of wrap together so people can understand. But there are characteristics in that Georgian period that are specific, but a Georgian house like Hardenberg might actually look like an early Georgian house, whereas a Georgian house in Charleston can actually look federal. So it won't be easy, but the organization of these different elements and how we research these things is kind of that next piece. Another example of a federal room with Georgian details is the Lancaster room. It is that full paneled wall that is typical of the Georgian period, but it was built during the federal period. It's going to be difficult at Lancaster to look at that. It's a federal era room, but it looks more like a Georgian room. Now, the panels are flat, they're not raised panel, which is more typical of the federal, but the organization of the room is more Georgian. Federal, Georgian, right? The complexity of this exercise means that we're going to have to speak in generalizations, means that we're going to have to think about these things and give me some leeway that even though we know when it was built, it has characteristics from a different era. And that's pretty typical, right? If you built a house in 1781, right after the Revolution, the federal sensibilities or the Adamesque style may not be as prevalent in America. So your house, even though it's built in the quote unquote federal era, really is more Georgian. So again, this is a difficult thing as far as dating and how it works in general, because even in the 1920s, we have arts and crafts in 1925, 1927 catalog. I have arts and crafts details in there. Now, the arts and crafts era had passed by 1927, but it still shows up in the catalogs. And so, how do we marry that? I tell you all this because I think that can help you think about when you're designing and working on houses today, is that you don't have to be this purist, this has to be perfect. That doesn't really exist. I remember going through some historic museums and them talking about, well, look, if they built a house in 1760, they might have had furniture that's much later. And so they wouldn't have had this perfect room with everything brand new furniture and everything else, right? People collect things, and you can have an Eames chair in an historic office like mine, right? Creating that story, understanding the context, understanding the things, hopefully gives us leeway as we begin to organize and put this thing together. Now, next time, I'm going to walk you through the books and the challenge of looking at all these books, and then just the quantity of products inside this books that makes it so difficult. Come join me. Thanks for following. Some of you have already written to me and said, hey, I want to help. I really appreciate that. I'm going to try to plug you in, and you'll see next time the amount of data that we've got to put together. It's going to make it hard. Be sure to follow me on the Instagram and Facebook, Hull Millwork, Hull Homes. Sign up for the newsletter. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.